Hello learners, I am Sudeshna Chaudhary, Assistant Professor of Philosophy at Icon Commerce College. Under the course of Social and Political Philosophy, I will be discussing the unit Marxism, Alienation and Class Struggle. In the previous class, we had discussed who was Karl Marx, what is Marxism, and the characteristics of Marxism. Today, we will be discussing on one of the important feature of Marxism, that is the concept of alienation. So, in this class, we will be discussing what do we understand by alienation, then what Karl Marx's notion of alienation is, and what are the different forms of alienation according to Karl Marx. Already, we had a brief description of alienation in our last class, but today we are going to have a detailed discussion of this topic of alienation. So first, let us discuss the concept of alienation. What does alienation means? Alienation is a term that has been interpreted in different ways across various fields of thought, and it does not have a single universal accepted definition. At its core, alienation refers to a state where people feel disconnected or estranged from things that should feel familiar or meaningful to them. It can describe a situation where individuals are controlled or overpowered by forces, systems, or creations of their own making, which then seem foreign or hostile to them. In everyday language, the word alienation is often synonymous with estrangement, meaning a sense of separation or disconnection. However, the concept is broader and includes multiple layers or dimensions. Alienation acts as an umbrella term encompassing the various aspects of disconnection. It is a concept that resonates across philosophy, sociology, psychology, and even literature, as it reflects a deeply human experience of struggling to find belonging and meaning in the world. Alienation is a key idea in the early writings of Karl Marx and has a long history. Its roots can be traced back to the Judeo-Christian tradition, which emphasized that humans must free themselves from alienation, often seen as a form of dehumanization in the world. However, the concept became more widely recognized in the 18th century, especially after the Industrial Revolution. During this time, material needs and demands became more important than other human needs. As a result, alienation started to be understood as the feeling or experience of individuals or groups who face a conflict between their material needs and the rest of society. It is important to note that though the concept of alienation is often closely associated with Marxism, as Karl Marx placed it at the center of his critique of capitalism and his analysis of labor in modern society, the philosophical roots of alienation trace further back, particularly to German philosophy, and specifically to the work of Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel in the late 18th and early 19th century. Hegel introduced the concept of alienation as part of his broader philosophical framework, particularly in his work Phenomenology of Spirit. In Hegel's philosophy, alienation occurs when individuals or groups become estranged from their true nature, social roles, or the broader process of historical development. Hegel viewed alienation as a necessary stage in the development of human consciousness and freedom. It represents a disconnection or separation from oneself, others, or the external world. But it also serves as a precondition for eventual self-realization and reconciliation. For Hegel, alienation was tied to his dialectical method, the idea that human development occurs through a process of contradiction and their resolution. While alienation may represent a moment of conflict or estrangement, it also creates the conditions for progress and the eventual achievement of self-awareness and unity. Karl Marx adopted and redefined the concept of alienation, grounding it in material and economic realities rather than the abstract spiritual framework of Hegel. Marx argued that in capitalist societies, alienation arises primarily for the way labor is organized. For Marx, alienation is not just a stage in development, but a systematic issue rooted in the structure of capitalist economies. His vision of communism was intended to overcome this alienation by creating a society where labor is cooperative and fulfilling. Now, what does Marx understand by alienation? What is the Marx notion of alienation? Our next discussion will be on that. So, we had discussed how Marx has borrowed the concept of alienation from Hegel, how it originated in Hegel and how it influenced Marx. So, what is the Marxist notion of alienation? We are going to discuss in details here. So, building on Hegel's philosophical ideas, Karl Marx introduced the concept of alienation in a more structured and practical way, transforming it into a key part of his social and economic theory. While Hegel's approach to alienation was rooted in idealism, focusing on abstract ideas and human consciousness, Marx shifted the focus to material realities. He connected alienation directly to the experiences of workers in the real world, particularly in the context of capitalist system and the relationships of production. Hegel viewed alienation as a disconnection within human consciousness and the broader spiritual or historical process. For him, alienation was primarily an abstract philosophical concept tied to the development of human self-awareness and freedom. Marx, on the other hand, interpreted alienation in a materialistic way. He argued that alienation was not just a matter of thought or spirit, but was deeply embedded in the economic and social conditions of life, particularly in how work and production were organized under capitalism. Marx focused on how workers or the laboring class are alienated through the structure of capitalist production systems. According to him, the way work is organized in a capitalist society prevents workers from finding meaning or fulfillment in their labor. For Marx, alienation was not just a personal or spiritual issue, but a systematic problem rooted in the socio-economic structures of Capitalist societies. Karl Marx introduced his theory of alienation in the economic and philosophical manuscripts of 1844. He explains how, in a capitalist society, the conditions of work and production fundamentally shape the lives of individuals. Unfortunately, these conditions are often oppressive and coercive, leaving workers in a state of disconnection from their labor, their true selves, and the world around them. Marx argues that in capitalism, work becomes something external to the worker. It becomes a task performed not out of personal fulfillment, but as a necessity for survival. Instead of feeling engaged and connected, workers experience their labor as forced and unnatural. This detachment harms both their physical and mental well-being. Workers often feel at ease only when they are not working, and when they do work, they feel out of place. This happens because the capitalist system does not allow workers to decide the type of work they do or how it is done. Instead, they are pushed to work harder, faster and longer, but without reaping the benefits of their efforts. The profits from their labor go to capitalists, not to the workers themselves. And this creates a system where workers lose any sense of meaning or creativity in their work, leaving them feeling disconnected from their lives and unable to fully realize their potential as human beings. In this system, workers are reduced to their most basic animal-like function, like eating, drinking, and surviving. The very act of work, which should be a source of pride and self-expression, becomes a burden. Alienation does not only affect the end product of labor, but extends to the entire process of production. Human relationships are replaced by relationships between objects, and the material world created by labor comes to dominate. Control created by labor comes to dominate and control human life. This inversion of priorities alienates individuals from their own humanity and from the relationships they share with others. Marx believes that humans are unique because they engage in free and conscious activity, a creative, purposeful interaction with the world. This sets humans apart from animals which act on instinct. So for Marx, humans are spacious beings, meaning that their essence lies in their ability to shape and transform the world through conscious, intentional work. And this process is called the life activity, which reflects humanity's higher purpose, combining intellectual, physical, and emotional expressions. Through this productive activity, humans develop themselves and their society. Work becomes an extension of who they are, a reflection of their creativity and individuality. Unlike animals, humans can create according to principles of beauty and harmony, producing not only for themselves but for the betterment of their entire species. But in a capitalist society, this essential nature is disrupted. Workers no longer control their labor or the products of their work, which alienates them from their species being, that is, as a human being. They are treated like animals, and this separation from their conscious activity leads to a disconnection from their true humanity. And from this, we come to the different forms of alienation that the working class, that is the labor classes, that is the proletariat classes, faces within capitalist system. So Marx has given what are the 4 types of alienation that a labor class or a proletariat class faces working under capitalist system. So the first is alienation from one's own species essence, that is self-alienation. This refers to workers becoming disconnected from their own humanity or true potential. Marx believed that humans are unique because they can work creatively and with purpose, shaping the world around them. However, in a capitalist system, work becomes mechanical, repetitive, and driven by necessity rather than personal fulfillment. To take an example of the first form of alienation, imagine an artist who is forced to mass produce the same design every day without any creative input. Over time, they lose their sense of individuality and feel disconnected from their creative abilities. In this way, workers lose the connection between their labor and their identity, becoming alienated from their very essence as creative and self-aware beings. So for the need of the market, the designer or the artist is to draw or make the same designs every time. What about the other designs or other creativity of him? All those are not concerned by the capitalist, the bosses or the company. He has been ordered only to draw a particular design and he has to do only that. So, he is alienated of his creativity also. The second form of alienation is alienation from fellow workers, which consists of social alienation. It is a form of socially alienated from your individual beings. In a capitalist system, labor is treated as a commodity. That means something which is bought and sold on the market. This competitive environment isolates workers from each other, destroying the potential for meaningful social connections or cooperations. Instead of fostering solidarity, capitalism pits workers against one another in a race for jobs, wages, and survival. To take an example here, workers in a factory may not have the time or opportunity to build relationships because they are focused solely on meeting quotas or pleasing their employer. They may even view each other as rivals for promotions or job security. This system erodes the sense of community and solidarity that could exist among workers, leaving them isolated and alienated from their fellow human beings. The third form of alienation, as depicted by Marx, is alienation from the product of labor. Under capitalism, workers do not own the products they create. Instead, these products are owned and sold by the capitalist class for profit. This means that workers have no control over or connection to what they produce. To take an example, a carpenter in a furniture factory might spend hours crafting tables, but those tables belong to the company, not to the carpenter. The workers has no say in how the tables are priced or used. They do not have the right to say the price of the table actually, and the profits from their sale goes to the factory owner. Okay, but the carpenter will get only his salary, not the extra profit. So as a result, workers feel disconnected from the fruits of their labor and unable to see their efforts as meaningful or rewarding. So the carpenter or any creative work, the creator of that work or the labor they made, they will not get the profit for their labor. The profit belongs to the company, or they will not get the extra wages also for their extra work. They will get only their salary. So this form of alienation from their product of labor was also found within capitalist economy, which is still prevalent today also in certain places. It is still prevalent. And the fourth form of alienation is alienation from the act of production, that is alienated from the work itself. In a capitalist system, workers do not have the freedom to choose how they work or what tasks they perform. Their labor is dictated by the needs of their employer, often involving monotonous or repetitive tasks that offer little satisfaction. This makes the very act of work feel meaningless and dehumanizing. To take an example, a worker on an assembly line might spend their entire day tightening the same bolt on different machines. They have no control over the process and derive no personal satisfaction from the task, as it is disconnected from their creativity or interest. This kind of work becomes a means of survival rather than an opportunity for self-expression or fulfillment, further alienating workers from their own activity. So, you are good at something, but to survive, you are doing some another activity. You want to be something else, but you are appointed as being something else. But you have to do it because you need that money for your survival. So thus, according to Marx, alienation in the workplace affects workers in four interconnected ways. First is from themselves. They lose touch with their creative and human essence. Secondly, from others. They are isolated from fellow workers and potential community. Thirdly, from the product. They have no ownership or control over what they produce. And fourthly, from the act of work. They cannot work freely or meaningfully, or they cannot choose what type of work they want. They have to work according to the need of the company, not according to their wish. So Marx argued that as long as labor remains estranged, meaning workers do not control their work or the outcomes of their labor, no part of human life is free from alienation. This condition affects more than just the workplace. For example, spiritual alienation. People might feel disconnected from a sense of purpose or meaning in life, as their creative potential is stifled by the demands of survival in a capitalist system. Again, they might feel political alienation. That means the structure of governance in a capitalist society often prioritize the interest of the wealthy elite, leaving ordinary people feeling powerless and excluded from meaningful participation in decisions that affect their life. Again, they may also find religious alienation, or they may also experience religious alienation. So in a world shaped by alienation, religion may be experienced as a way to cope with suffering rather than as an expression of spiritual freedom or fulfillment. So for Marx, all these forms of alienation are connected to the estrangement of labor, which he saw as the foundation of human life and society. Marx placed special emphasis on alienation in the workplace because he believed that humans are, at their core, are creative beings. He called humanity man the maker, highlighting the importance of labor and production in defining our essence, that is a human's essence, through their work, through their productive and their labor. And when people lose control over their work and the ability to express their creativity, it affects every other part of their lives. Work, for Marx, is not just about survival. It is a fundamental way in which humans shape the world and themselves. And when this process is disrupted, it creates a ripple effect of alienation throughout society. So the concept of alienation is most explicitly discussed in Marx's early writings, particularly in the economic and philosophical manuscripts of 1844. In his later works, such as Das Kapital, the term alienation is rarely mentioned directly. But this does not mean that the idea loses importance in Marxist thought. Instead, it becomes embedded in his broader analysis of capitalism and society. The concepts of historical materialism, class struggle, all has roots in the concept of alienation. So, in this video, we have discussed the notion of alienation, then Marxist notion of alienation, and what are the different forms of alienation according to Karl Marx. In our next video, that is the third video of this unit, we will be discussing on the notion of class struggle of Marxism. Thank you.